Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulina wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. You probably wouldn't believe how intense these lights are, because they're not pointed at you. So, to begin, the topic is, so how do I start this? The first thing is that basically we were supposed to just lecture you, but as always we actually like to hear what you guys have to say. And the only way to do that with such a large audience is to take some of your comments or questions. You know that the topic is about MSA and deconstructing, reconstructing, constructing MSAs and stuff like that, and golden rules for Islamic workers. So in light of all of that, we can say from the beginning that if you have any questions or comments about the topic or anything that's said throughout the lecture, you can just write them down and hold them up, and some of the volunteers will grab your questions. And when my wife is speaking, I'll kind of look through them and we'll try to see what we can address at the end. So that's number one, and that's engaging you guys, because what we do with adults is engage them, and what we do with children is entertain them. And I think most of you guys are in the former category. So I'm going to try to engage you a little bit, and I hope that you will also engage the material as much as possible so that we can get somewhere. We sat down, we reflected what are kind of like, we can say, a 10-point platform for Islamic workers. What are the things that you really need to focus on? So I'm going to say those 10 things in the beginning. We're not going to get to all of them. My wife will cover 3. I'll cover 2 or 3 depending on how much time we have. And then we'll move on. And you can catch us wherever you catch us if you have other questions, inshallah. So point number 1 is sincerity. I'm just going to go through the 10 first. Point number 1 is sincerity. Because I know some people actually do write things down, and that's why I'm going to go through the 10. It's important to write things down. I'll just leave it there. Number 2 is worship. Number 2 is worship. Number 3 is love. 3 is love. 4 is servitude. So sincerity, love, and servitude will all be addressed by a shaykh, inshallah. Number 5 is knowledge and understanding. It's a little bit longer, so I'll give you an extra few seconds. Knowledge and understanding. Number 6 is trust. Number 7 is consultation, to consult with one another, talk amongst each other. Number 8 is time management. Sure, for those of you who are in MSAs, you understand the importance of time management. Number 9 is vision. And number 10 is active patience. Active patience is sabr, but when we say sabr and you translate it as patience, people can sometimes get the misunderstanding that it's passive. But sabr is not passive. The word for patience that we're using here is an active patience. So these are the 10 things. Everyone's okay? And everyone who's trying to write, you're okay? You're not. Can you repeat 4, 6, 12, 7, 2? Okay. Repeat all of them? Okay. Number 1, sincerity. Number 2, worship. Number 3, love. Number 4, servitude. Number 5, knowledge and understanding. Number 6, trust. Number 7, consultation. Number 8, time management. Number 9, vision. And number 10, active patience, perseverance. Okay? If I have 1 minute at the end, I'll repeat them again, in case you missed one. So, I'll start with worship. And I think that this is actually, this is primary, this is foundational. That the work of student organizations, Muslim student organizations, is first and foremost primarily an act of worship, number 1. And number 2, that the activist or the worker themselves has to be grounded in worship. In worship itself. Because this is the foundation of what you're doing. You have to remember this. In the end of the day, all of us are going to die. Correct? Sometimes when you start talking like this, people think you're morbid. Think that you love death, and you have to talk about death all the time. No. Talk about death so that I can live properly. So that I can live with the right perspective in mind. So the first thing is that this is an act of worship. Knowing and understanding that we will all die, and as such we want our lives to have been lived with purpose and value and benefit and commitment to that which we believe in. Okay? So worship, what do you do? It's very simple. In the sense that if you follow the rules of Islam, or that you're aware of the Prophet ﷺ and what he did, you take steps. So say you're a Muslim student right now, you're trying to increase in your relationship with God, then you take steps in order to increase in that relationship. Step number 1 is that you make sure that your 5 prayers are on time. If you're not praying your 5 prayers on time, you're not changing the world. I hate to break it to you. I know that might be a bust for some people, but it's the reality. You're not changing the world. And there's 2 things that come to mind. The first is the statement of Dr. Saeed Ramadan, may Allah have mercy on him, the father of Tariq Ramadan, which brings me to something I wanted to say, by the way. And those of you who know me know that I was going to say something about this, because I'm a little bit boring. But, you know, Tariq Ramadan, how many of you heard Tariq Ramadan speak? What does he tell you when you say takbir in the middle of his talk? What does he say? He doesn't like it. Why? No, it's not because it distracts him, although that's probably true. But that's not the only reason. The main reason is that أَلَا فِي ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. Verily, in the remembrance of Allah, hearts find ease. The remembrance of Allah is not a slogan. Okay? I know this is Sheikh Jamaal being boring and annoying, but it's not a slogan. There's a conflicting opinion out there? Okay, that's fine. I guess we'll talk later. Takbir is fine. I'm glad people are excited and they're saying Allahu Akbar and stuff like that, but like it is Allahu Akbar. You know what I'm saying? It's something very heavy, very deep. So we shouldn't reduce acts of remembrance into acts of entertainment or acts of just like hoorah. This is what I thought of when I saw the signing. I love the signing. It really brings a different element to the talk because it's so expressive. I want to say something else. It's another side point. Thank you. I want to thank MSA West for doing this and for Global Deaf Muslims for putting this together. And for you guys, thank you. Something happened earlier today. I'm going to embarrass myself because now I said something that's very serious and I'm probably going to cry when I tell this story right now. But something happened earlier today that really touched me. And it was after the Faces Not Facebook session where we talked about the importance of engaging with one another, speaking face to face, feeling each other, experiencing each other and everything else. And then afterwards there was a discussion that happened between myself and a sister who's an exchange student and one of our sisters who's deaf. And it was really powerful. So I wanted to tell you guys to kind of encourage us in these kind of, supporting these kind of ventures. I just used Yani. So what happened was the sister came up and she said, I'm an exchange student from Palestine. And when I came here in my first week, my English was still not as good, and I was in this class, and we were talking about religion, and a man in the class, he said, I'm afraid of Muslims. And she said, I didn't know how to respond, because I had just arrived, and my English wasn't very strong, and I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. And as we were having this discussion, it was being signed as well, and one of our sisters was there, and she was observing the discussion and engaging the discussion, and she said, you know what, this has happened to me too. And another one of the deaf sisters, she said, this happened to me too. And she began to give her, subhanAllah, I've never seen something so eloquent without words. She said, she gave her this like pep talk about how you have to actually engage these people and you can't just pull back, you have to actually go forward and put yourself out there and engage the discussion and connect with them on a human level and get past these prejudices and all this stuff she was saying to her through signing. And the interpreter was translating for us, I guess, interpreting for us. And at the end of it, she said, and I just want to give you this pep talk, and I want to tell you basically that it's okay, and you have to keep doing it and be strong, and I want to give you a hug. And she grabbed her and she gave her a hug. And it was so powerful, subhanAllah. And it just made me think about how many times we've not benefited from the experiences of our brothers and sisters who may be deaf, or may be blind, or may have other things that they're struggling with, or they're dealing with, and that it's a shame. So, alhamdulillah, thank you to MSA West, and thank you to everyone else that made that happen. That's a really big step forward, alhamdulillah. Which brings us back to worship. So, that came out of, I don't know what, but it started with Tariq Ramadan and his father, Saeed Ramadan, who said that our problem is essentially a problem of spirituality. And that when people start talking about how they want to change the world and they're going to make all these big things happen, I ask them if they pray their Fajr prayer on time. Are they praying their morning prayer on time? This is a question of spirituality. Another time, one of the leaders of Islamic work in Egypt, he was invited to a village to give a talk on brotherhood internationally and the work of da'wah that's going on in different places and stuff like that. So he came to the gathering and he told them, before I give the talk, I want to take a survey, and I'm going to write it down. You guys can write it down and I'll look at it. And the survey question is, how many of you prayed Fajr in the masjid today? How many of you prayed the morning prayer in the mosque? And he took the poll and he got the answers, and he looked at them and he said, no, I'm not going to talk about the topic. I'm going to talk about the importance of praying the morning prayer in the mosque. So he gave us 45-minute, 1-hour talk on this issue, and I'm speaking to myself at the same time that I'm speaking to all of you on this. And he said, he finished and he said, okay, I'm going to come back in a month or two, and if we're going to do the same poll, and if there's improvement, I'll give the talk that I was supposed to give, and if there's not improvement, I'm going to give the same talk again. Because if we can't fix that, we're not going anywhere. And another story, there was an Imam al-Banna, he was traveling through different areas, and they went to rest at night. And there was a man with him named Omar. And as they laid down to rest, it's a long day of travel. Like imagine now you go home, or you don't go home, you go to your refugee camp, wherever you guys are staying, and you try to lay down to sleep. And you see who else is over there, and you try to find out if they're asleep yet. So this is what, you're very exhausted, right? It's a long day. So he asked him, he said, Omar, are you asleep yet? And he said, no, I'm not asleep yet. So he waited a few more minutes, and he asked him again, he said, Omar, are you asleep yet? And he said, no, I'm not asleep yet. So he waited a few more minutes, and he said, Omar, are you asleep yet? And Omar is the one telling the story. He says that, okay, well, I figured he has something going on. I'll just pretend like I'm asleep, so he can do whatever he needs to do. So once he thought that he was asleep, he got up and he went to the side of the room and he began to pray. It's that prayer in the night, it's that act of worship when nobody else is looking that carries us in our work. This is not a work of material progress only. This is not something that you check off stuff and you get it done. This is a work that needs a very strong power of the heart. And that power of the heart does not come except through acts of worship when nobody else is watching. So one of the major things here is worship. Worship is a major cornerstone for Islamic workers. The second one that I want to talk about is knowledge and understanding. And they go hand in hand. Sometimes people study a lot, but they don't actually come to a solid understanding of how to live Islam. Live Islam. Not only talk about it, live it. And sometimes people come to a very solid understanding, but it's not backed by a whole lot of knowledge. So what will happen is when they face new situations, they'll make mistakes because they don't have the grounding that they need. So they go hand in hand, that you have to understand, learn, read. I know reading is out of fashion. It's hard to read blog posts, let alone books. But reading is important. So read, learn, attend lectures, everything like that, increasing in your knowledge and understanding, because this is how you're going to bring your faith to bear on the problems of your day. Right? And that's what we're trying to do. The third one that I want to address is trust. And this is one that we don't, I think everyone knows and understands subconsciously the importance of trust, but we don't always talk about it. And I think that trust is one of the absolute cornerstones of any sort of organizational work. That if we do not trust one another, we will get no work done. Because you don't trust each other. The foundation is broken. There's nothing there. The content is lost. The relationships are weak. It doesn't work. And trust is earned. Sometimes people get upset. Like sometimes, well, I won't go there. But sometimes you get upset that this person doesn't trust me, or that person doesn't trust me, or these people, they don't trust me yet. In the end of the day, like, you can't force people to trust you. You have to be there, and you have to do it, and you have to prove yourself. And if you prove yourself, people will trust you. And if they feel that you have integrity, they will trust you, even if they differ with you. It doesn't mean that you have to agree on everything. But eventually you will build that level of trust that will bind the relationships together in the work. Because there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's going to be difference of opinion, there's going to be people who want to neutralize what you're doing. There's going to be so many different things that happen. Late night conversations, work that needs to get done when nobody else wants to do it, that all requires trust. Decisions that have to be made on the moment, all requires trust. So trust is also one of the major foundations for Islamic workers. Number 4 is consultation. Meaning we have to actually sit together and talk about it. We have to actually be democratic in our process. Right? So sometimes we outwardly proclaim democratic processes, but when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, it ends up being pretty much dictatorial, authoritarian in nature, right? But it has to actually be a democratic process, in the sense that it's shura. Okay, some people are very, I know there might be people in the audience that are allergic to the word democracy. I mean, I thought we were past these things, but earlier in the session, something came up that I thought we dealt with 15 years ago also, so we might as well mention this one as well. In our last year in Azhar, democracy in Islam was one of the topics in modern fiqh issues from the College of Sharia. And the funny thing I thought about this research was it didn't even discuss whether or not democracy was an issue. Some people have an issue with democracy, as like philosophically it's wrong or something. It didn't even talk about that. Like the author of the research, he took it as given. These are the manifestations of democracy within the understanding of Islam. It wasn't even a discussion whether or not democracy is kufr and all these other weird topics that we get into. Allah guide us. So consultation is to really, shura is to have a conversation, to have a discussion with the people who are making decisions, to sit at a table and together come to a conclusion about what is best. Sometimes you make the wrong decision, right? And even in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, there were times when he took shura from the companions and the decision ended up not being the best decision. But he wanted to make the decision based on their shura. So shura is really important. That consultation is really important. You might lose a battle here and there, but in the end you end up as a group stronger and more cohesive and moving forward in a positive direction. The last one or two that I'll mention, I have 1 minute, 2 minutes. So time management is one of them. Time management, basically, if you're in college and you don't think you have time, you have time. There might be like 2% of the audience that actually works full-time or a lot of hours in order to fund their education, and I'm not referring to you, so I apologize in advance. I'm referring to people their education is more or less funded either by the government or by their families. They don't have to work. If you're in that category, you have a lot of time. Regardless of what you think, you have tons of time, and you're never going to have that time ever again in your life. So be careful about it. Go to the best program I ever saw from one of the brothers was he woke up every morning, he went to Fajr in the mosque, and then he would go to the library and he would study. Till probably like midday, 12, 1 o'clock, and he was done. Every single day, and he was done. And he was top student in almost all of his classes, and he did very well on the MCATs, and he's very successful, mashallah. So wake up early, don't stay awake having silly conversations and talking about guys and talking about girls and talking about all these things that are really not going to go anywhere productive, most likely. Like probably if you're talking about it with a group of people in the middle of the night, it's not going anywhere productive. Sorry to break it to you. So you might as well just save it for when it actually deserves to happen. So use the morning time, go to sleep early, wake up early, use that time, you'll be set. The rest of the day you can do whatever you want. You can read, you can talk to your friends, you can go to class. Some people do that. And then you can do whatever you need to do. So time management is really important. And vision. Vision is the last point, is to keep in mind the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal, number one, is the pleasure of Allah. It's the pleasure of God in whatever you're doing. And number two is to do something productive that's bigger than us individually. And if we don't remember that, there's no way we can last in this. And I have to remind myself of this every single day. Because you guys know, as an imam, you see crazy things, and you deal with weird issues, and you have politics, and you have everything else. And if it wasn't for the fact that I have to remind myself, like, okay, you guys exist, regardless of the 3-4 people that might make issues every now and then, you can't do it. But you have to remember that what we're trying to do is more important than those petty issues, than people's petty concerns and the small problems that you have. They're not really that important. But what's really important is doing something that's amazing. So the people who organized this conference, for example, can testify that the stuff that they went through trying to organize this, there's probably fights here and there's disagreements, and there's political issues, and there's all this other stuff that happens. But in the end of the day, when they come and they see all of you here, most of whom are awake, they feel like it was worthwhile, right? So you have to keep that vision in mind, that end goal in mind, and that's what will carry us past the difficult times. Inshallah, I'll pass it over now to the Shaykha, and then we'll take your questions at the end. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.